Welcome back. We continue with our Inspirational Women series as we count down the weeks until International Women's Day on March 8th. And joining me now to discuss her role as a woman in the Arab world is acclaimed journalist and media trainer Paula Yacoubian. Paula is currently the host of interviews where on a weekly basis she interviews different figures across the political spectrum. Just this past week she interviewed former Prime Minister Saad Hariri on the 7th anniversary of his father, martyr Rafiq Hariri's assassination. Welcome, Paula.
Thank you, Youmna.
How was it interviewing?
Well, first, thank God it was in Arabic.
Yes, it was in Arabic. How was it interviewing former Prime Minister Saad Hariri after he's been gone for a year?
Yes, it was. We tried our best, my colleague and I, to make it newsy and to get the most newsworthy interview. And I think it was, by all means. It's not easy to interview your boss, you know. Mr. Hariri is the owner of our television, so we did our best to be really objective, ask all the questions that people are asking in the street and everywhere. A journalist would ask from any television. So really we had no red lines. We asked all the questions we had in mind. Sometimes maybe the follow-up wasn't on the same level because it was a duo, and I think a duo would not work best in this kind of interview.
It's less intimate than if you were just face-to-face.
Absolutely, the one-on-one I think is best in, especially in the political arena, because you need to follow up. Follow-up is something very important in this kind of interviews. But I think it went well, and it was a good experience.
Was there something specific that he said that you retained from that interview?
A lot of things that he said, but what I think we all retained the most, that he's coming soon as his foot is healing, and he'll be really soon in Lebanon, and I think this is something that everybody's waiting for.
You also are probably the only Lebanese journalist to have interviewed former President George W. Bush.
Yes, that was my first experience trying to speak in English and doing an interview
with the president. Do you remember what a specific moment with George W. Bush during the interview?
I remember after the interview, he stayed for about 40 minutes asking me about Lebanon and asking specific questions about people. He asked about, especially about the Druze leader, Walid Jumblat. He wanted to know about him. And he asked some really specific questions about the status quo in the Middle East, about politics.
Right, and at the time, it was during the middle of the Iraq War. That's when the Americans had invaded Iraq,
It was in 2005, 2 years after Iraq's invasion, and the Middle East was a top priority on the American foreign policy agenda. Lebanon was a top priority back then. Thank God we're not a priority right now anymore. But
well, it depends who you ask. Really.
Yeah, we're not top priority on anyone's agenda right now, and this is not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing.
You said it was a challenge to interview George W. Bush, but in your career as a journalist, tell me what has been the most challenging thing.
That was really challenging because I'm telling you, I'm speaking. He had the advantage of the language over me, and I didn't know if I can handle it. I was really scared, but afterwards, my life is full of challenges. I mean, we live in a country.
Can you tell me one specific one as a woman in this field?
I have challenges every day. We live in a male-dominant environment. I come from a background where there's a lot of politics, but there is no journalists, no politicians in our family. It's not easy to make it. Lebanon is not an easy country to be a journalist and a woman journalist, and it's much more difficult to be in the political arena. So it is challenging every day. You need to prove yourself. You need to ask for the first chance. Not only ask for it, prove yourself in it, and then you have all these, people trying to make you look bad, the jealousy that is around in this field. After all, it's show business. So it's like, and at the same time, it's a career different from being a singer or an artist.
Right.
It's
got a more serious side, maybe.
Yeah, it's not an easy task.
Sometimes in your interviews, you can be controversial. You'll ask questions that not a lot of people will ask. What inspires you to get up in the morning and go to these interviews and be as honest as you are?
Listen, when I started this career, I thought that my duty is to keep people informed and keep politicians under scrutiny. But with time and living in Lebanon, it's like living next to a volcano. You don't know where it's going to erupt.
Right.
You cannot just inform people. You don't cover the story living in the Middle East. You live the story, and you live the impact of the story on your family, on your kids, on your daily life. So we cannot just cover stories in Lebanon because we live this story. We have an opinion about it. And then these are very critical times in our history. I think we as journalists or as people who have the mass media as their profession, they have the duty of impacting the life of others, of trying to make them change their views.
Right, as they play, as they're a mediator. They mediate between the politician and the people.
Not only that, sometimes people will listen to a journalist much more than a politician because they know that these people should be on the side of the people, of their rights, of their fights, of their daily struggles. So that's why the duty of a journalist right now for me, living in the Middle East, is not only to be objective and unbiased all the time. When you think that you have to stand for something, when you have a cause that you think you have to fight for, you should do this fight. And then even if some people will get mad and angry, that's not a problem. But you should try to impact. This is a duty for me today.
Who inspired you while you were growing up? Who inspired you to do this? Was there a specific figure that you could think of or something?
Well, the first figure, the first image I have in my head is my father, who is a survivor, a genocide survivor. And this is something very difficult for a
right, because if people don't know,
Paula,
for people who are watching us, if you don't know, Paula Yacoubian is also Armenian.
Yes, and my father is a survivor, a genocide survivor. This is not something that you can outgrow or forget or live your life without thinking of it. So I'm first generation, and this is one of the causes that, this is why I wanted to be a journalist. One of the causes is the Armenian genocide. And then my son right now, I want him to live where I lived. I want him to grow up in Lebanon, but in a sane and a healthy Lebanon. I don't want him to be sectarian. Paul is 7 years right now, and I really have a dream for my boy and for all his generation and kids his age to have better days than what we are witnessing right now.
And hopefully that's the hope for all children who are growing up in Lebanon.
I'm sure that's the hope for mothers at least.
Okay.
So let's give a chance to women in society to be in politics, to be in parliament, in governments. And this is a very big challenge right now. We are heading towards March 8th. It's a big day for women.
Yes, March 8th.
Yes, and
not to be confused with March 8th, the political party, by the way.
This is much more important than any political event because it has to do with our society and better days for our children. And let me just add one thing, if you may. President Saad Hariri was the first one to give the chance to successful women to be in the government and not in black. Just really women who achieved in life. He gave them this opportunity. And right now, I look at this government from all the bad things that Miati might have done. I think having a government without women is his worst ever. We shouldn't accept anything like that. Whatever politics and sectarianism, is there a word like that? I don't know.
Sectarianism, yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is something else. This is something different. This is something we have to be united as Lebanese and fight for the right of women, especially in Lebanon.
Okay.